people in the world who have not been able to enjoy freedom in their lifetimes is going to be maybe the single most transformative thing for people who yearn to be free. Cash will continue to be short money, and that Bitcoin will be more prevalent as long money. So people who have a time preference that allows them to wait and save and be patient will benefit by using Bitcoin, and people that are engaged in activities that require instant gratification will be more involved in fiat currency. We're racing the race car at 200 miles an hour right towards hitting the wall.
Bitcoin is freedom money, and I feel like freedom money belongs in America.
I'm with you.
Awesome.
Amen.
This podcast is entertainment, not financial, tax, or legal advice. Views expressed represent statements of the speaker in their individual capacity, do not represent the views of Unchained, and should not be considered investment advice. Speakers often have personal, family, or business connections to Unchained, which may include direct financial benefits. Please see our disclosure at unchained.com/podcast.
Senator, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with us.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. You tweeted recently that the U.S. national debt is one of the most concerning national security issues. How do we as a nation fix this?
I've been sounding that alarm for a long time. So have many others, but not enough. Spending ramped up tremendously during COVID to try to get through that crisis. The problem is we didn't ramp down spending after crisis. So we have kept the base of spending very high post-COVID, and it just keeps growing from there. Now, this is going to be a long-time concern because along with that happening, spending increasing without justification for it, our interest payments on the debt were run up pretty high when some of the low-interest bonds and securities matured, because now they're being refinanced at higher interest rates, which means the American taxpayer has to pay more to finance the same debt that we continue to carry on the books. So you have higher spending plus a higher obligation for debt payments. So now we're spending over $650 billion on interest payments on the national debt. That's what we pay first before other spending. Of course, then we pay Social Security and Medicare, both of which are on an unsustainable path. They're both going to be insolvent within the next 10 to 15 years. I know this sounds gloomy and bleak, and it's because it's gloomy and bleak. We've also increased what's called discretionary spending over $1 trillion and over what it was during COVID. So facing spending for a war in Ukraine, spending to support Israel, spending to support a possible invasion of Taiwan, on top of all these other things, at a time when interest rates are high and Americans' pocketbooks are strained by the cost of gasoline, rent, automobiles, food. It is a scenario that's just crying for a solution. The solution may not be out there because we have two candidates for president, one being current President Biden, and the likely Republican nominee, former President Trump, both saying they don't want to touch entitlements. So there's not much place to go. And honestly, I got to say, it's one of the reasons that I am so grateful that decentralized finance, that Bitcoin came along, because we actually may need an alternative to the U.S. dollar. And I hate to say it, I'm pessimistic that the Congress has the gumption to fix it. And when you ask members of the U.S. Senate why they don't think we should spend a lot of time trying to fix it, if neither candidate for president, the sitting one, nor the former president, are willing to address entitlements, it's unfixable. At that point, we're racing the race car at 200 miles an hour right towards hitting the wall. And nobody that I can find in great number is willing to take their foot off the gas, even knowing we're going to hit the wall. So it's a pretty scary scenario for fiscal conservatives in Washington.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It does seem very gloomy and bleak. So like if 10 years go by or 20 years go by and we can't fix it, how bad is it going to be? Like what might happen in your opinion?
Well, Social Security, if we do nothing, will hit the point where it's insolvent. It will Social Security benefits will drop by about 25% the first year and then continue to go down from there. That will create a demand among people who are on Social Security to prop it up, augment it with general fund revenues that we don't have. So that'll create a big tension. So people who are currently on Social Security or will be on Social Security probably within the next 15 years really need to focus on additional savings. Then Medicare is going to go broke, be insolvent before even Social Security. That's a harder one to fix. And so I think that there will be more emphasis in Congress to exercise price controls on medical costs to keep them down rather than spending more tax dollars that we don't have to prop up Medicare. Medicaid will be highly at risk. That is a program that's mostly administered by states, health care for low-income people. And it will be at risk because I think the funding for it will shift from the federal government to the states in larger part. Right now, it's the states pay some and the federal government pays more. That will flip in the years to come. States will be required to pay more for health care for the poor. And other entitlement programs will be at risk too. So it's going to get ugly. And that's why I'm so hopeful that people will consider Bitcoin, which is a store of value and will become more common as a means of exchange in the future, will become part of their investment portfolio because we're going to need non-U.S. dollar denominated stores of value to augment our savings in the event that things get so out of control that it's irreparable.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you're such a large proponent of Bitcoin. I think that's awesome. One thing that's cool about Bitcoin is you can self-custody it, you can hold it yourself. Do you think that self-custodying Bitcoin is like a fundamental right for all Americans?
I absolutely do. It's freedom money. It is something that you can own, keep for yourself. That is, as you say, self-custody. But you don't have to lay awake at night worrying that someone is going to steal it from you. It's very secure. You don't have to pay taxes on it. You don't have to buy insurance on it. You don't have to pay maintenance on it. It's not like a house or a building that is in need of repair and you have to pay taxes on just for the privilege of owning it. This is an asset that is, I think, going to, especially for people, say, 45 and under, become a really important part of their retirement savings, of their investment portfolios, and eventually become a much bigger part of just how they transact business every day.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what you said about Social Security, every dollar that I pay into Social Security, I don't think I'll ever get back, unfortunately. So Bitcoin kind of is like a new form of savings that I hope will help me be able to retire one day.
Yeah, and it's really interesting who knows that and who believes that and who doesn't. People who are embedded in traditional finance still have a lot of confidence that we would never let the nation get this far gone. But serving in the House for 8 years and now serving in the Senate, I just disagree. I think we're at very serious risk that we will get it wrong, that we will let some of these more dire consequences of failing to address it sooner happen. And so by all means, everybody who's in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s should invest in Bitcoin as part of a diversified asset allocation. I don't think anybody should keep all their eggs in one basket. I certainly don't. I have some stocks and some bonds, and some are large cap and small cap. I have some international equities, and it's just a good way to have a diversified asset allocation. But having a component of your retirement savings in Bitcoin is going to be crucial going forward. So I'm happy to see that traditional finance companies like Fidelity and BlackRock are rumored to be applying soon for Bitcoin ETFs. They are traditional companies using an exchange-traded fund concept to embed Bitcoin into retirement savings for people who are nervous about having a private wallet and holding Bitcoin themselves. I think that this is going to be a good way to start encouraging people that are in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s and older to get exposure to Bitcoin through a traditional finance mechanism like an exchange-traded fund.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the budget, you talked about how it's just so gloomy right now. Is there any hope that one day we might be able to run a balanced budget, or is that just completely off the cards? You think that there's no chance?
Well, I think there is a chance. Okay. There are people in Congress who can show you on paper how it can be done. In fact, right now I think we're our budget, the one that the Senate has proposed and is using, is $2 trillion more money than we take in revenue. But if we just went back to the 2019 budget levels, that would shave $1 trillion off. So that alone cuts our deficit in half. And then there are mechanisms to even close that gap even further. So there are people that can show how it can be done. It's just that the appetite isn't there to do it. And I'm as shocked as you are. We had a conversation in the Senate this week about putting together another debt type commission to show some of the ways that this can be done, how that $2 trillion gap can not only go to $1 trillion, but can go down to zero. And I was so surprised at the response. Members were saying, well, if neither presidential candidate in 2024 has the appetite to do it, let's not waste a bunch of time on it. They're not wrong. I mean, that's a very realistic response, but it's also, I fear, a really irresponsible response. I mean, we need to convince Joe Biden and Donald Trump that this is a real problem for our country.
Yeah. Going back to Bitcoin and the U.S., how do you want to see the U.S. approach their view on Bitcoin over the next 10 years?
Well, I strongly believe that Bitcoin is going to be the digital asset that is the store of value, the means of exchange, the commodity that takes its place next to gold, that it becomes digital gold, that everybody knows it's digital gold, and that it is both a store of value and a means of exchange, and is used much more ubiquitously, even by consumers. We know that it releases the friction in the system in terms of allowing transactions to settle faster and cheaper. And that's going to be one of its huge virtues in the commercial world. It's not, I think, what individuals concentrate on, that transactions are settled faster and cheaper, but they should be. And as it becomes more commonly known that through Bitcoin you can have all three of these things, a faster and cheaper settlement, a store of value, a means of exchange, it becomes just so much more utilitarian within the U.S. economy and the global economy that it will be the emergent means of exchange. You know, it's interesting to see how the U.S. dollar, the paper dollar, is becoming far less accepted as a means of exchange. I went to a hotel the other day, tried to pay for my coffee with a $20 bill. They said, we don't take cash. Our National Park Service does not take cash to get into national parks. This is a government agency. And a government agency, our national parks, does not take cash to get into national parks. That indicates just how old-fashioned, good old-fashioned cash has become. And the people will start realizing that cash is not king.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Do you think others in the Senate, like your peers, other senators, do they understand Bitcoin, or are they starting to understand Bitcoin more, or not really? Are they still maybe behind the curve a little bit?
We were making progress. When I first arrived, it was very clear that very few people knew what it was, and those who did were extremely skeptical. So Senator Kirsten Senator Kirsten Sinema of Arizona and I created a financial innovation caucus. It still meets. We have really good speakers come in to try to explain the use of blockchains, the existence of companies like Chainalysis that can identify crimes committed with Bitcoin, companies that are doing very innovative things with regard to mining Bitcoin in a way that sort of balances utility highs and lows. Almost endless. What is mining? What is a commodity versus a security when Bitcoin is part of the equation? All of these things. We have great speakers come in. Mostly it's the staffers who attend, but that's really important because they're educating their bosses. So that's been successful, but we've had two big setbacks. Senator Gillibrand and I, of course, have the Responsible Financial Innovation Act, which is the comprehensive framework for the U.S. government to deal with digital assets. It creates and acknowledges the existence of stablecoin, of digital assets that are commodities, digital assets that are securities, the entities like custody services, and how digital assets will be treated under their jurisdiction. CDBCs, it's a very comprehensive piece of legislation, and we have already moved the part from our bill on illicit finance. But we had two setbacks. One was the series of failures that led up to FTX's failure. So too many members of the Senate were conflating digital assets with the company FTX. They weren't seeing that you can commit fraud, with yachts, with fiat currency, with gold, with art, and it doesn't take digital assets to make a colossal fraud. In fact, I think that the verdict in the FTX case has helped illustrate that. So that was a big setback. So then we were finally recovering from that. And then recently we have seen Tether and Binance and other companies, platforms associated with funneling cryptocurrencies to Hamas. And October 7th was just such a jarring day for the world in terms of just how barbaric people can be towards each other. That helping fund a terror organization that, decapitates babies and puts them in ovens until they burn to death, rapes people until their pelvises break. I mean, the things we've seen are just so incomprehensible that anyone who would be complicitous in helping fund that kind of barbarism is on our radar screen, including Binance and Tether. So I'm really pleased that Senator Gillibrand and I were able to get language on ferreting out illicit finance uses of digital assets into the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, we did that last summer. The House needs to incorporate the illicit finance language that's in the Senate bill into the final bill that passes both houses. And I think we'll be successful.
Nice. Very cool. I'm curious, how do you envision Bitcoin and the dollar evolving together over the next 10 years or so? Like, Bitcoin is this hard, scarce money that may, designed arguably to go up in value, whereas the dollar is this, loose, easy money that's designed to debase against, the basic consumer goods that we all need every day. How do you see that, juxtaposition?
Yeah, I think that cash will continue to be short money, and that Bitcoin will be more prevalent as long money. So people who have a time preference that allows them to wait and save and be patient will benefit by using Bitcoin. And people that are engaged in activities that require instant gratification will be more involved in fiat currency. Now, how that will play in the bigger financial markets, U.S. Treasuries, stocks, and non-government bond markets, fixed income markets, I don't know. I also wonder how it's going to play within the reserve funds of the world. The U.S. dollar is the reserve currency. But, with the rise of China and the yuan and other currencies that want to compete for a role within the reserve currencies of the world, with the potential for oil to be sold and bought, denominated not in U.S. dollars but in other currencies, really may change what constitutes the world reserve currency. We may go to a basket of currencies as the world reserve currency. And if that happens, I am absolutely certain that Bitcoin will be among them, and perhaps dominant among them. So these are times of great disruption as we move from the industrial age to the information age. And these kind of disruptions are going to happen, I think, more quickly than people my age like to realize, because we're just starting to grasp what this is all about. And, sometimes when you can't grasp it, you just think, well, hopefully I won't be around when this becomes ubiquitous part of our everyday life. I think that even people my age are going to live to see the day when this is a ubiquitous part of everyday life.
It is crazy how fast it is happening. I mean, Bitcoin's 15 years old, and it's already, a very important global asset now. It's crazy. You mentioned earlier that Bitcoin, could be used more as a payments technology. And I know some people have talked about the minimis rule, where capital gains below a certain threshold of spending a certain amount of Bitcoin that you may not have to pay capital gains on it. Is that something that could happen, sometime in the future within the U.S., where if you are buying a coffee for Bitcoin for $5, you may not need to pay capital gains or capital losses on it? Or
it absolutely should be that way. And I'm for a higher threshold against U.S. dollars as the de minimis amount. Some people want a lower threshold. But I think it's important that that be a component of federal regulation of the interaction of the U.S. dollar economy with the Bitcoin economy.
Do you think that can really spark Bitcoin payments for the entire industry?
Well, I hope it does, because once again, the faster and cheaper settling of transactions is going to make it'll be kind of a game changer, especially for merchants, people who are sellers, as opposed to buyers of goods and services. And so I hope it does.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Senator, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and we really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed being with you. I enjoy hearing about the amazing transformations that are occurring. Every year I'm around Bitcoiners and miners and core developers, and now moving into the Web3 economy, learning more about artificial intelligence, how these things integrate with each other. The more I see the amazing world that people your age are entering, and the amazing world that I will see in my rearview mirror as I get older, it's going to be fascinating. And it's just so important that these technologies be allowed to grow and be nurtured in the United States, because they are assets that thrive in freedom-loving economies, and they will allow people who are not in freedom-loving economies to enjoy a sense of freedom, to be that sovereign individual, even within a geographic area that gives one no sovereignty. So the opportunities that are provided by Bitcoin in particular, I think, for people in the world who have not been able to enjoy freedom in their lifetimes, is going to be maybe the single most transformative thing for people who yearn to be free. So thanks for letting me be on your podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, Bitcoin is freedom money, and I feel like freedom money belongs in America.
I'm with you.
Awesome.
Amen.